with that, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Windi Epperson, and I'm the Customer Account Manager at Njevity. This webinar is a collaboration between Njevity and Cavallo. So Njevity, the makers of PowerGP Online, and Cavallo, the maker of SalesPad. So we also have Matt Greyerbiehl here with us from Cavallo. He's the Director of Engineering and Solutions at Cavallo, and he's going to take us through our ProfitMax stuff when we get to that point. Behind the scenes, we also have Allie Reagan. She is with Njevity, and she's going to help us answer our questions and answers as we go through. So thank you for joining this session of Turning GP Data into Profit. We always like to start our webinars with the mission statement of Njevity, which is to improve the life and success of our customers and partners by providing exceptional business application experiences that simplify, inform, and delight. And so, of course, today is going to inform you. Hopefully, it will simplify for you. And who knows, maybe we'll say something really witty and it will delight you as well. All right, so just a quick little, just in case you're unsure, who is Njevity? As I mentioned, we are the makers of PowerGP Online. First and foremost, we are a partner that supports Microsoft Dynamics GP. That is the one product we support. We are solely focused on Dynamics GP. We are the creators of PowerGP Online, which is extra ISV products that you get if you are in our cloud, because we are also a hoster. So we have a fully hosted GP environment where you can put your GP in the cloud, keep all of your reports, keep all of your customizations, just do a lift and shift into our cloud, and then gain all the functionality of our PowerGP Online products. If you are unsure about those products or what they do, we do a webinar about once every other month, every third month, where we cover all of the features and benefits of PowerGP Online. So just check out the Njevity website and upcoming webinars, and you can see anything else we have coming up. Lastly, we are the founding members of the Knights of GP. Knights of GP is a co-op for customers and committed ISVs and for consultants. And what the plan here is, this is still a work in progress, but the plan for the Knights of GP is to continue support of GP after Microsoft finishes support. So just a brief caveat on that front, there's a lot of information out about end of life of GP, and end of life is a misnomer. It's not actually end of life, it's end of support. But there's a timeline for that. So Microsoft is going to continue supporting GP up until 2031. We'll see that timeline here in a minute. And once Microsoft stops, that's where the Knights of GP are going to step in, and we're going to continue providing support for GP, including new features, payroll, tax updates, and training. So this is the kind of the roadmap. Microsoft is going to continue releasing new features, product support enhancements until 2029. So 3 more years of that. They'll continue releasing security updates until 2031. So you have 5 years of runway with Microsoft. Some of us feel Microsoft will extend that because there's still so many customers using GP, but that's yet to be determined. But somewhere in that process, the Knights of GP are going to start ramping up. It's going to be folks who know how to program for GP, folks who know how to support GP, and we're going to carry on that banner so that you can still use GP 2035 and beyond. So that's our plan with the Knights of GP. Again, if you are interested in that, you can just visit knightsofgp.com and sign up for a newsletter, keep yourself posted. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Let me switch presenters, if I can get there. And Matt's going to tell you the Cavallo side of the story of what Cavallo has going on and how we're partnering up.
Awesome. Thanks, Winnie, for that. Yeah, so I thought we'd start with our why and our simple vision. And so the reason Cavallo exists is to make our customers' businesses more profitable, competitive, and valuable. And that's at the core, that simple vision, and that idea manifests itself in the different products that we develop. In this case, ProfitMax, we're going to be taking a look at in just a moment. But with our why, I want to jump into a little bit of our history by the numbers. And so we've been around in the space since 2003. So our initial product offering, SalesPad, was developed specifically for Dynamics GP, and since 2003 we've served over 1,000 distributors. And in terms of the value we've created, whether it be through automation or the simplicity of our tools, limiting clicks, things of that nature, we're estimating around $100 million in value that we've created for our clients over the years. As far as retention rate, we have a high retention rate, 92%, a high NPS score. So customers that use us, use our tools, tend to stay, they like us. And in terms of overall users on our platform, we've seen about 21,000, just over 21,000 users on the various platforms. With that, I want to jump into a little bit of our founder's story and kind of how we evolved and came to be. And so this is Pete, our founder, and at the time, back in 2003, he was using GP to run his distribution business, and his business was focused on edge banding for office furniture. And one of the things he noticed with GP was that he lost visibility of orders as he was processing them. And so his simple, novel solution was to create a wall of clipboards where you could quickly identify orders that were on back order or orders that were ready to ship and pick, pack, and ship. And as he's staring at this wall with all these clipboards, he thought there has to be a better way. And so he teamed up with a local developer, and they built what we know now as SalesPad. And so SalesPad is a purpose-built platform that handles order management, powerful workflows. Even on the purchasing side, we have tools there now, as well as additional modules for warehouse management. So it's kind of evolved into a whole platform of tools available for Dynamics GP users. And it's really aimed at creating those automations, reducing manual touch points, and giving data insights to help drive decisions and drive that profitability and that why that we build our products for. With that, I want to jump into our promise. So I know there's messaging out there about the life cycle of Dynamics GP, and Windi hit on that. And just to kind of reinforce the message from Windi, we're also here. Our promise is simple. We're here for GP users for the long haul. We plan to continue to support our SalesPad line of products. We're continuing to iterate on them, do standard releases. We're also developing more products, which we'll see in a moment with ProfitMax. But we're committed for the long haul, and we don't intend on going anywhere. So I just want to, make that statement. That's our simple promise. Now I want to transition now and get into the ProfitMax platform, because that promise and commitment to continuing to develop tool sets for this space has really manifested itself in this ProfitMax platform. And so that's what we're going to look at next. And when we think about the ProfitMax platform, it's really broken into two different buckets of functionality. On the one side, you have margin intelligence. And so what we aim to do with that is really dig underneath the surface of your top line revenue and dig into the nitty gritty of your margin. You might be growing the business, but your margin might be eroding, so you're not as profitable. And so we really look at that profit aspect and the drivers behind that. So is it price shifts that are leaving money on the table? Is it your COGS is getting out of control? Are you over discounting? Do we have reps that are trying to close business and leaving money on the table through excessive discounting? So we want to really allow you the visibility to dig into some of those details to drive that decision-making process and ensure that you're not leaving money on the table. And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is this idea of customer intelligence. And so one of the things we'll see is this customer churn prediction. And what we aim to do with that is really understand, is a customer likely to leave you? And if so, surfacing that as soon as possible so that you can get ahead of it, reach out to that client, prevent them from leaving. And so we want to surface those insights to really improve that customer retention on the other side of the house. And so with that, let's go ahead and jump in and actually see a little bit of this live. We'll step through this. So I'm going to switch my screen up and go into the ProfitMax platform. And so this is kind of the home screen, and I'm going to jump first into that margin aspect of the tool set. And so I just want to first draw your attention to kind of the aggregate view of the numbers. And so what we're looking at here is our total revenue numbers, that top line number, our COGS, and our gross margin. And this is all related to a comparative period. And so in this case, we're looking at trailing 12 months compared to the prior trailing 12 months. And so we're doing that year-over-year comparison. And so what we're really saying here is that year-over-year, our revenue increased 2.5%. Our COGS, we actually performed better. So we actually reduced our COGS by 8.8% in this case, but our margin actually increased by 12.9%. So we're actually doing quite well in terms of margin growth relative to our top line growth. We've actually made some improvements there. But if I want to really get into the details on those numbers, that's where we have our margin variance analysis. And what the margin variance analysis looks to do is take this 1.3 million that we saw as an improvement in gross margin and explain that with greater detail. And so that's what we see over here is that that unrounded margin number. So I've got that 1.27 million. And then we explain that with the different drivers that can impact it. So we have price as a reason, we have returns, volume, cost. And then we look at what was the gross loss in each one of those drivers? What was the gross gain in each one of those drivers? And therefore, what was the net impact to our bottom line by the losses and gains for that driver? And so if I'm looking at this margin variance analysis, I can see I've got 1.2 million that I've increased, which is great. But I also see that I did leave some money on the table in terms of price shifts. So I had a negative net impact in terms of price. And so if I wanted to look at that a little bit closer and identify maybe some specific items or some specific customers that may have contributed to that, I can go in and explore my margin variance details. And so this will allow me to look at the net impact and then filter by a specific driver. And so here are my drivers. And if I wanted to specifically look at price, which was really the only negative impact, we had a little bit of a negative impact with returns, but the largest impact was in terms of price. I can go ahead and select that. And then that's going to break down the losses and the gains. So on the left side of the screen, I see my losses. And then on the right side, I see my gains that contributed to that net impact. And the losses and gains are then broken down by different segments. So we can see customer, we can see item, we can see sales rep, we can see customer class, item class. So what did I gain and lose across those different sort of categories? And so if I want to look at customer as an example, here I can see this particular customer had a negative net impact of $32,000 or 7.5% of my loss within the price category. And so if I want to look at that a little bit further, I can select that customer. And because I'm starting with customer, it's then going to show me the items that I sold to that customer that related to that negative $32,000 in price loss. And so that's what we're seeing down below here. We're seeing the customer. There's my loss of $32,000. Here are the specific item sales that contributed to that loss. And so if I want to look at the one that contributed the most, it's this water bottle, and the negative impact of the price shift for that water bottle contributed to $26,000 in loss due to price to this customer. So if I wanted to explore that further, we also have related lines, so we can get right down to the invoice line level. And so I had 206 invoice lines related to this item, related to this customer. And if I want to look at those specifically, I can drill into that number and look at the invoice lines. And then I can also apply some additional sorting or filtering to maybe explain or identify a point of inquiry that I should go back and review with either my sales team, my procurement team, whatever the case may be. And so one of the things I like to do with this search grid of my invoices is filter by document date. So right now, I'm looking at the oldest documents that are in this comparative period. So this is the oldest document in the prior period that I'm looking at right now. And I can see my unit price for this particular item was pretty consistently at around $17.18, although I did have a couple outliers, but pretty consistently at $17.18. Now, if I filter this down and look at the most recent transactions, I should be seeing a shift, and you can see that at some point we shifted and we're consistently now pricing this out at about $14.43. So we've shifted in price somewhere between the comparative periods, And so now I have an interesting point of inquiry. Why did that price shift? Was that a pricing policy that was put in place globally, or was that something we did specifically for this customer to maybe try to drive more volume? If we did that negative price impact outweigh the volume increase gains? Or was this a sales rep that was trying to close business and maybe just drop the price to close business? So the point being, with getting down to that transaction level from my top line variance and seeing the net impact of that price shift, I'm able to get all the way down to the transaction level to then start that inquiry in my business. I'll jump back out here to my margin variance analysis. So that was an example with a customer, but we can just as easily start with an item. And in this case, you can see I have a medicine ball that accounted for 30.9% of my price losses, or that 289K that I lost due to price. And this particular item, there was $104,000 left on the table in terms of pricing shift. So if I wanted to look into that a little bit further, the same thing applies. I can go into the item, but now because I'm starting with the item, I'm now seeing a breakdown of all the customers I sold that item to. And I've got that filtered so that the largest lost customer that bought this item is on top. And so I can see $15,000 in lost revenue tied to this customer that was buying this item. And if I wanted to look at those sales lines again, I can go into related lines and I can see those specific invoice lines. I can do that same kind of sort, go back to the earliest. It looks like we were pricing it out at about $15.96. We shifted to $8.97 somewhere along the line. So was that a strategic decision, or was that somebody just pricing it differently to close business? I can go back and learn more about that aspect. So I'm going to jump back out here. So that's a little bit of margin variance analysis. And like I said, we can do the same thing with sales reps. This rep in particular looks like we contributed to a loss of $137,000 due to pricing shifts. So maybe I need to talk to that rep and look exactly at the invoice lines and see what they were doing. Maybe they were operating outside of our catalog pricing and just trying to close business, and I need to shore that up and implement some training or maybe some workflow to look at price and margin to make sure we're not pushing those documents through if they don't meet our margin requirements. So that's something that I can then take an action on. So I'm going to jump back out of margin variance and talk a little bit about the customer churn module. And so if I go down on my menu, we also have a section for customers. And under customers, we have this churn prediction. And the churn prediction dashboard will allow me to look holistically at all of my customers, and then it assigns a churn prediction or a risk score to that customer for churn. And one of the things that you can do in the back end as part of the setup is define what that time period of inactivity should be to constitute a churned customer, what that definition should be. In my environment here, I have it set at 365 days, saying that, hey, if they haven't purchased from me or there's no activity from them in that time period, they're considered churned. And so what we do is we look at the customer's behavior on roughly 40 different data points on the back end. And some of those data points might be, the recency of their last purchase, the speed and the acceleration. Are they accelerating in purchasing behaviors, or are they slowing down in their purchasing behaviors? There's, like I said, about 40 different data points that we're looking at on the back end of this to come up with a risk prediction. And we found with our clients that are utilizing this, that risk prediction is roughly 80% accurate. And so the way this dashboard works, I can highlight different risk bands, and that will subtotal up those risk bands with what margins at stake, how many customers are at stake. So if I want to just focus, and this is typically how folks will use this, they'll look at the high risk first and kind of prioritize that. We can see that high risk, I'm looking at about 349,000 of margin at risk, or roughly 2,300 customers that I could potentially lose. So I want to get in front of them. We have additional filters here that we can layer some additional filtering on the sub list that comes out of your risk band. And so here you can see I'm also applying a filter to just look at my A segment customers. And so that's another thing that we have within the platform, is this concept of segmentation. And so segmentation allows you to define, are you going to look at margin or are you going to look at revenue, and then set the band for what category each customer should fall into. So typically, like your top 75 revenue generating or margin generating customers would be in your A. The next 15% would go to your Bs, the next 10 to your Ds, or your Cs rather, and then your Ds are largely unprofitable customers that may be risky to do business with, and maybe you want to dissolve those partnerships. But what I'm looking at here is the A customers, so my most profitable segment and high risk. And then I can do things like filter this by lifetime sales. So here we can see I have a customer that is high risk in my A segment. Their lifetime sales are 168,000. And I can see other insights like the days since their last invoice is 247. So they haven't purchased from me in 247 days. Days until churn, based on my definition of 365, I've got 118 days until they're designated churned. So I might want to get in front of this particular customer. Other things that we can do with these filters, we could do something like if you have a customer or sales rep that wants to filter just down to the customers that are assigned to them, I can go in and set a filter for sales rep, and then I can put in, maybe I want to do just Paul Gray's customers, and so there I can see my high risk A segment customers that are assigned to me as Paul Gray, and these are the customers I may want to follow up with. Future releases of the ProfitMax platform will include filtering tied to sales reps. So as they get into the platform, it'll kind of default to their customers, so they don't have to do these filters. We'll also have the ability to email out these reports as well. So if there's other folks that you want to disseminate this information to, you'll be able to send those reports with those additional details to other users. A couple of the things I wanted to cover. So what if analysis is another powerful tool that will allow you to look at those aggregate numbers for the period that you're looking at, and then kind of tweak different variables to see what the impact would be on your margin and overall sales. And so as an example, in our what if calculation, we have your unique customers. And so we could set something like, if we were to increase our unique customer count by 5%, all things considered, what would that do in terms of our overall margin? If we were to increase average orders per customer from the current rate of 3.95, increasing that by 10%, what would that do? Average price per line, if we just did a blanket 1% increase, what could we expect, again, all things considered, to be true in the next period if we were to institute some kind of change like that? And so you can come in and kind of play around with these different scenarios. And so average price per line in the current state is 165. So if we said, hey, if we were able to increase the average price per line by 5%, to 180.23, what would that do in terms of our overall margin? And so you could see that overall margin would increase by X amount. And so it can be a pretty powerful tool to look at this at an aggregate level and say, okay, based on our current rough metrics, if I were to tweak these numbers and institute some kind of shift or change in terms of our pricing strategy, or put together a campaign to aggressively go after customer acquisition and target 5%, what would that do to my margin total? And so we can kind of see that here, and then we can easily reset this and play with other variables there. So nice, powerful tool that's built in what if analysis. Jump back up here to our home screen, and there's a couple other things I want to point out here. So top items, gainers and decliners. This is another thing that we look at. So we can look at your items, and this is declining items. So I can look at, with hover over features, what was the previous trailing 12 months value at? So in this case, we had 398,000 in sales for this item, and then in the most recent trailing 12 months, that went down to 315,000. So we saw a variance of 82,000 for this specific item. And so we have this top gainers, decliners concept, and I can switch to what were my growth items. And so I can see here with my growth items, previous trailing 12 months, 398, current 569. So we're seeing $171,000 increase on this specific item. So nice widgets at a glance to just be able to see gainers, decliners. Similar concept with our customers over time. So separate from churn, we're aggregating your customer gains and losses over time. And so I can see my starting point and then what I ended at and what's the variance from the previous period. And so I started this current period at 6,800, just over 6,800, ended with 7,100. So I had a positive increase of 289 or 4.2%. And I can see customers that reactivated as well as new customers, and then netting out with the churned based on my definition of who I lost through that period. So I can see kind of net gains and losses from that customer over time. One more thing to mention while we're here, and then I'm going to jump back into the deck and talk about a couple other things that we do in terms of insights and how we bring those into SalesPad to drive different functions. We also have a profit indicator, and we saw some of this with the what if analysis, but this gives you tremendous value by giving you insight into what your current customer count is versus the prior, what was the variance. So we saw a 1.53% increase, or actually a decrease from prior. Those are unique customers that we sold to. We can see average orders per customer. So it looks like current, we're actually increasing just a little bit there. So that's headed in a positive direction. How many lines per order? And so we're seeing we're pretty flat there, but maybe we want to put something in place like a tool to use item suggestions or something like that to increase the overall line count per order. We also have average price per line. So is that increasing or decreasing over time? COGS, is the cost per line increasing or decreasing? How are we doing on that? Are we driving our cost down over time, or is it increasing? So all of those insights for profit indicators can be viewed here as well, to give you, again, actionability to go in and make decisions on policy changes, technology changes, anything that you need to do to kind of shore up those numbers and get them in the direction that you want to head in. Last thing I'll mention here is the AVA Insights, and so we do have our own AI integration, and so I like to think of this product as being very dense. There's a lot of data in there. There's a lot of insights packed in there, and if you want to kind of make sense of all of those insights in a very easy, digestible way, the AVA Insights can be very useful for that. So it'll take all this data and kind of consolidate it into a sound bite that's easier to digest, like I said. So if we wanted to look at items with margin decline, it's saying, hey, we should be looking at that. It'll redirect me to my margin decline item, and I can see year-over-year analysis and all the items that I might be gaining or losing on. So it redirects you to those insights where you can then look at that and take action if necessary. So that's a little bit of the platform, and like I said, I'm going to switch back to the deck because I have a couple more items to cover in terms of how we embed those insights into SalesPad through our Customer IQ tool and allow you to kind of drive some action within your SalesPad environment. So let's shift now to Customer IQ for SalesPad. And the first thing I'm going to point out here, this is a screen grab from a sub-tab on the customer card in SalesPad. And so if you're using Customer IQ, we actually add this sub-tab to the customer record, and we give you that ABC layout. So the segmentation will give you that layout over time, as well as the customer churn risk over time. And we also have the ABC score, churn risk score at the current time, lifetime sales margin, lifetime margin. So all of those insights are presented there. You can see also, let me go back in there. You can see also that over this plotted chart, we also have these stars. And so this will actually integrate with the CRM tool within SalesPad. And so if you have an interaction that's generated from this, it'll log that interaction. And so you can see over time that the churn risk goes down the more interactions in this case. So we had some interactions, and we were actually able to get this customer down into a lower churn risk band because we reached out to them. And so you'll be able to see that correlation between churn risk over time and specific points in time that you had that interaction with the customer that may help drive them downward. This is the customer header, and so the sub-tab has a lot more detail, but we also surface the risk score as well as the ABCD segmentation at the top as well. And so that's an example at the, or actually, I'm sorry, this is at the sales order. So in addition to being on the customer card, we can also pass this into the order itself. And that's significant because these values can then be picked up with workflow. So you can set a workflow in SalesPad to evaluate an A-risk customer. And so a use case for that might be, hey, we've got a customer that's an A for us. They're highly profitable. They buy a lot from us, but they're also at a high elevated risk of churn. And so maybe we want to prioritize their orders in workflow and say any A customer that's a high risk at the moment, let's jump them in line, give them prioritization for allocations and fulfillment, move them right into pick, pack, ship so we're not delaying anything on their orders. And so these values can play into workflow and be quite actionable to drive some behaviors in the organization to really shore up those accounts and make sure that they are being addressed. So let me go to the next slide here. Oops. So this is an example of that. Again, the churn risk coming into the sales monitor. And so if we have that risk in sales monitor, and again, on the sales document, we can use that as criteria to move those documents along. There's also a dashboard that will embed inside of SalesPad. And so very similar to those insights that you saw on the ProfitMax platform, we'll give you that visible layer, that visualization of the data, so you can see the ABCD score, the churn risk, and then down below, depending on which bands and which score you're setting and you know what you're filtering by, that sub list will then populate with all those customers that you should reach out to. Another report, so if you're familiar with quick reports inside of SalesPad, we also have a quick report that gets deployed, and so this will give you a listing of the customer in more of a list view with the ABCD score, the churn risk, and then lifetime margin sales, lifetime sales as well, so that you can kind of see that. And then of course there's the auto filter rows that if you're a SalesPad user, you're familiar with, so you can kind of filter down to your A's very quickly, elevated risk, and then have a list that you can export to Excel or to a template that maybe you want to make actionable and send out to a rep to follow up on. So again, I kind of mentioned this already, but there's workflow rules that are part of our workflow engine that will enforce extra margin checks for D customers. That's a use case we didn't really talk about. We kind of talked about prioritizing A customers and high risk customers. But if you have a D customer, maybe you want to enforce margin checks to make sure we're not losing money, because historically that's a customer segment that we're losing on. And so we could key off of that and do a margin check for D ranked customers to make sure we're not losing money in those cases. So that's just another use case for the workflow. And then, as I mentioned, we do have a integration with our CRM. And so if you're not familiar with our CRM, there's this concept of course, prospects and opportunities, but also embedded interactions and emails that you can use throughout the different objects. So whether it's on a customer level, a vendor level, it's kind of pervasive throughout SalesPad. And what we do here is we actually leverage on the back end, it's an automation agent, if you're familiar with that, job that looks at these risk scores and will compile this list for you with the customer number, a predefined subject, the address code, notes and description. And the notes and description are going to be, the customer is at this ranking and they're at high risk of churn or elevated risk of churn. And it will actually compile this comprehensive list. And then you can multi-select this and schedule these as interactions within SalesPad for follow-up. And so if you recall, kind of on that customer card where we saw the churn over time and those stars of those interactions, this is where that star comes from. So the idea is, we should be driving those churn risk scores down. The more we're reaching out, the more we're getting in front of the customer, and we're helping you do that in an automated fashion by automatically going through your customer list, compiling this list, and then allowing you to multi-select and generate those interactions for follow-up directly within SalesPad. So just want to do a quick check, make sure I covered everything that I wanted to touch on. There was a couple other things. So one other thing to mention on the, I'm going to jump over to the mobile. So if you are using mobile, we do have that embedded in the mobile tool as well. So if you're using mobile to toggle through customers, you'll see that. And we also have it on our data collection or inventory manager, I should say. So on Inventory Manager, if you're using that tool to do any kind of pick, pack, or ship, we'll also surface that insight from Customer IQ on that level as well. Again, the thought being if we want to prioritize any kind of picking for a particular customer segment or someone that's in a high risk band, to kind of prioritize that on the warehouse floor, we'll also surface that in the Inventory Manager screens as well. So those insights that we pipe in, we really push them out to everywhere that they could be useful to drive behaviors to, better retain those customers. And so that's the idea. So with that, that was the last item I wanted to cover. I think we can get to sort of the Q&A portion now. And Windi, I don't know if you had any comments on your side, but that was everything that we wanted to cover on our end.
Yeah, I think the only last comment would be that this is a series of webinars that we're doing with Cavallo. So again, check out our website at Njevity.com and look for upcoming webinars. We're going to be talking in a month about inventory, a little bit of tips and tricks from the GP side, and some of the Cavallo functionalities for Inventory Manager. And then I believe we have one on a sales order, and I think purchase order too. In the next 6 months, we got a handful of these. So we're happy to be co-hosting with Cavallo on these and getting some good information in your hands. And with that, we open it up for questions. And I will unmute everybody just in case anybody wants to ask a real live question. And then Allie's going to maybe see what we've got coming in our question queue. Allie, was there a question?
Yes. How accurate is customer churn?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, with the customers that we have deployed on the ProfitMax platform, we've identified it to be about 80% accurate with the risk band it's placing customers in.
Thank you. And then, let's see. How are you guys handling security for data?
Yeah, so we have, first of all, we take it very seriously. So we have quite a few protocols in place, all your standard best practices, segmentation with our multi-tenant environment to protect the data. We have regular cadence of vulnerability test checks. We also do MVA, so, for the logins. So yeah, it's something that we have protocols in place. We follow the best practices and beyond for that aspect.
Awesome. Okay. Not seeing anything else trickling in.
Okay. Well, we will go ahead and give you 20 minutes back in your day. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to email me, Epperson at Njevity.com. That said, I'm about to be out of the office for a bit, so you can also ping sales at Njevity.com. And what's a good one on the Cavallo side, Matt?
So we could use Matt.Greyerbiehl at Cavallo.com.
There is one more slide with contact info.
Okay, I can forward that. Yep, 1 second. Oh yeah, marketing's probably a better one. Yeah. Yep.
Greyerbeehl's a handful to type.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Allie. Yep.
No problem. And then there is one more slide for those of you who wanted additional information on the Knights of GP. We'll throw that QR code right back up in case any of you missed it earlier. And we'll be sending some follow-ups with the webinar recording and additional info on Knights of GP.
So everybody, thank you for joining us. please feel free to register for future webinars and look for the follow-up content on this. We appreciate your time today.